For someone who makes a lot of giant cosplays, giant ball gowns, giant wings, more wings, it's a lot of wings. Anyway, you'd think that I would use a lot of space, but like 90% of my crafting and working and sewing and painting all happens within this little craft room, which is the star of today's video. Now, I'd love one day to have a giant dedicated workshop, but until I get rich and famous and can afford that, I have optimized and customized this little 2x3 meter craft room to maximum multi-use efficiency, or close enough. Hello, I'm Miss Twisted. I do cosplay and makeup and other weird and whimsical crafting projects. Today, we are going to do a bit of a room tour along with a couple of snazzy upgrades and revamps. And a lot of those upgrades are thanks to today's sponsor, FlexiSpot, whose boxes are sitting in my living room right now, and I'm so impatient to break into them. But we'll get to that. For now, we're starting right here in this corner here. Well, here. So when I said 90% of my work happens in this room, well, 90% of that 90% happens at this desk here. So if I'm sewing, if I'm painting, the sewing machine goes away, some kind of protective mat comes out here. Although given the state of the desk with all the glue and paint stains, that step doesn't always happen. So I kind of need this space to be as versatile as possible, which brings me to one of my biggest problems. So it's not what you'd call stable, and that is a massive problem when it comes to the fact that I'm both sewing on here, I'm using power tools, I'm using a grommet press, and often I'm filming at the same time. So if this is like not staying stable, that's become a bit of a problem for me. Also, this desk was a standing desk. Keyword there was, because like the manual crank has been broken for a while, which brings me to my first upgrade and back to FlexiSpot. So FlexiSpot have sent me an E7 premium standing desk. So I'm very excited to crack these open. I'm going to drag my old one out of here first. That's going in the garage as a bit of a spare. Ow. Oh, that hurt. I do want to say I was noticing the quality of this desk even as I put it together, like all of the smooth welding, the sleek shapes and heavy duty materials. I chose a bamboo desktop just because I love that lighter wood color and texture, and it'll be pretty sturdy and scratch resistant. FlexiSpot also sent the C7 premium ergonomic office chair. Much like the desk, the C7 is designed to be durable, comfortable and super adjustable. Seriously, every part of this chair is adjustable to make sure it is exactly how you like it. Good morning. Let's take this thing for a test drive. So firstly, I love that you can get it this low. Some of my work requires me to get right over the top of it. I got a sleek little underdrawer as well. Right now, it's basically got all my sharp pointy things in it because I like to keep those separate because I don't trust myself with sharp objects. So of course, this is the first way I tested this out. All right, I'm gonna try something a little bit silly here. Parkour. Well, this is very high. Okay. While the desk is raised, I want to point out that having a cable management tray is a lifesaver. I can't believe it took me this long to get one. I also love that you can like save your preferred height so that I can just like press a button and I know exactly what height it's going to be. And I know that this is going to be where I need it. I set up my tripod and camera on the desk itself just so I could test out whether or not everything stayed really smooth even with my Singer heavy duty. I wanted to do a drink test too, so it was a great excuse to make my second cup of tea for the day. The chair is honestly about as adjustable as the desk is. Like there are so many different positions and every little part of this seems to move to make sure that you can get it exactly as comfy as you like, which is especially good for me as a bisexual who can never decide which way I want to actually sit. FlexiSpot are doing a massive anniversary celebration with store-wide discounts, including the standing desks like the E7 and the E7 Pro. So go check it out for yourself. The link is in the description below. Use code 24org30 for an extra $30 off the E7, E7 Pro and E7L. And there's a combo discount with the C7 chair too. Don't miss out on designing your dream setup with FlexiSpot. So kicking off my room tour over here in this corner, basically this is the corner where I do most of my stuff. I'm usually not sitting on my desk, but you get the idea. This corner here specifically is a corner that I'm pretty sure like every cosplayer has, which is your little nook where you keep the tubes. And by the tubes, I mean like your rolls of EVA foam, your rolls of Warbler. I've got some cardboard in here. This thing here, I think is like just a textured grippy mat, which you can put down like over a table or something to protect the space. On this little clip-on hutch thing are pretty much just like my everyday tools. I've got my pens, I've got like some silicone tools. I have like a UV light pen, which is actually surprisingly useful for the amount of times that I do some sort of UV reactive makeup or costume. I am forever writing myself like little handwritten notes or lists. So I have like a giant stack of, I don't think they count as like post-it notes because they're not sticky on the back, but like a little sketch pad that I just constantly use. Some rulers and set squares, and this is like one of my little clip-on ring lights that I use all the damn time because it's got that sort of like bendy gooseneck so I can have it right down if I'm like filming over the top of something.
On the wall here, this beautiful owl. I got this the last convention at Artist Alley alongside this creepy snake thing.
So this whole side of the room is cube shelves, as you can see. I know that they are like the most basic choice when it comes to like storage. I don't care. I am ride or die for cube shelves. I'm just a little bit unreasonably passionate about how good they are for storage, okay? I have painted about half of these with like all of this brown, basically hoping that I can sort of blend it in with the whole fantasy themed backdrop I've got going on. I'm just gonna move this tripod for a second so you can kind of see that like it means I can sort of film roughly from this angle so I can get like more variety and still keep that same like warm, cozy, wooden vibe going on. I'm just trying to pull the space like more into fantasy and less IKEA. Up this end, I like to keep a couple of like empty shelves and like completely empty boxes, mostly because like, I don't know, I think it's kind of important to have just like spaces where you can just dump stuff, because sometimes like if I'm on a crafting spree, I just want to like clear my desk, chuck it out of the way and then keep going, but I'm not quite ready to like put away that stuff yet. Very useful when you're juggling multiple projects. All right, so up this end, I have one box, which is literally just full of giant spools of thread. I think these must be like overlocker threads. I actually got like a ton of stuff from like a local boutique that was closing down that just made a ton of like real bougie clothes, and like they were doing all their stuff on clearance. Some of it was free. I think these ones were some of the free stuff, and I'm just like, man, this thread is gonna last me years. So I've barely even touched this pile, and that's like 2 different boxes deep. I'm set for thread for life, basically. This box contains fern. That is like my big long-term personal project. I've got a busk for when I eventually make a corset. I got spiral steel boning. I've got some couture. Fern for me is that one project that I've set to kind of be like a magnum opus. Like it's no budget, no time limit, just whatever I need. One of the things I bought is this perfect butter yellow silk dupion. I had to buy this from an Etsy seller in Greece because it was the only place that I could find that had anything close to what I wanted for that corset. I'm a little bit scared to use this, but I'm not going to be touching that for a few months, so that's future Charlotte's problem. I have about 6 balls of this cotton yarn that I'm going to make her scarf out of. This is my first little practice piece for her shawl, which I was just kind of like relearning to knit. Not bad for a start. This box is basically just scrap pieces of paper, foam, vinyl, warbler, cellophane, that sort of thing. I tend to use a lot of my scraps. I try and throw out as little as possible, so it's useful just to have a place to chuck it all. I got my makeup brushes and makeup sponges in there. Not very exciting. That's an empty one. This one is just a couple of cosplay accessories that I haven't quite like put into storage yet. Like I've got my husk wig and my felon chest, I guess. This is the most important box, of course. This contains Juniper. Literally just all the costume pieces. So the pants, the belt, the shoes, you get the idea. This box is miscellaneous accessories. So this is like where things go, that like little things I find in $2 shops and whatnot. I've got a fan, I've got some lace masks, clip-in flowers, clip-in horns, some jingle bells. I think this must have been for my son cosplay. More fans, lots of colored tights and fishnet gloves. Oh, I just found my old reading glasses. I didn't know these were in here, but that's nice because I've been looking for these for a while. This is another miscellaneous box, but it's more about like crafting supplies. And seriously, I'm a massive hoarder when it comes to this stuff. If there's like hard rubbish going on or like op shops, resource rescue kind of places, all that sort of thing, I go nuts for that stuff. I got bags of grommets. I've got like big plastic clear globe things, a packet of Halloween eyeballs. We got plastic tubes. These S-hooks, actually, I always find a lot of uses for those. Zip ties, googly eyes, gold leaf, PVC elbows, trolley wheels. Like I will keep anything and everything. And every single time I use like the slightest little odd thing in here, I feel justified in just keeping a bunch of junk. Oh, that's too high. Hang on, just bring you down to my level. This little shelf here is like the most accessible point where I'm like sitting at the desk here. So usually here becomes like a bit of a dumping ground for a lot of stuff. Right now I've got my current reading glasses there and like some hair ties, and that's about it. Like I've cleaned up this space before I did this tour. I try and have my drink bottle here whenever I can because I'm really bad at drinking water and not just dying of hydration. So if it's right next to me, I'm trying to encourage myself to drink a bit more. In fact, and consider this your reminder to go drink water as well. I know you're all just as dehydrated as I am. Also, I don't care that it's like ugly. I always keep a roll of toilet paper nearby to clean up spills, to like do little touch-ups if I'm painting, that sort of thing. Look, it's cheaper than keeping around tissues or like kitchen towel or kitchen paper or whatever it's called. Right under the table here is where my sewing machine tends to live. I used to like try and put it like in a spot with a cover over it, but it's up and down off my desk so often, it's just not worth doing. So it just kind of lives here so I can just pick it up whenever. Down here, it's just like a big box of makeup cases and things that I can put makeup in if I'm traveling. Used makeup brushes go in here. Basically, like if I'm doing some sort of complicated makeup look, I just tend to chuck my brushes in here after I've done it so I can wash it later, which I always do as soon as possible and definitely don't leave it in there for a long time. Honestly, a lot of these supplies, and come to think of it, like a lot of supplies in general from my entire collection, I didn't like pay for or acquire. People just gave them to me. It's one of those things where once your friends and family kind of know what you do, you kind of become the go-to point for people to donate like their old unwanted supplies, and I am more than happy to take them off people's hands. You know what, while we're on the floor, I'm just gonna do these ones too. This one here is literally just like a mannequin head and then like bits of my costume for Hemlock. I still think this gauntlet is one of the coolest things I've ever made. This one is all my glues and clays and priming. I, again, have a lot of this because I've gotten a lot of donations from people who just like are cutting down on their collection, and then hey, more stuff for me. This is my sewing box. So this one's, I guess, pretty important. It's also probably like the most organized place in this room, and that's definitely not because I very recently organized it in preparation for this video. Top layer, we've got everything sharp on one side because again, I don't trust myself having sharp objects in amongst other things. Kind of want them to be separate because I feel like at some point I'm just gonna like dive my hand in and it's gonna come out like a pin cushion. So we got pins, needles, machine needles, stitch rippers or whatever they're called, that sort of thing. And then this side is all the stuff that I use like all the time. Wonder clips. If you are a crafter and not already all over these, you should be. These are fantastic. Honestly, they're so useful. You can kind of use them in place of like pinning fabric together a lot of the time. Definitely recommend it. This is one of the coolest things, and it was like a freebie from one of my local fabric stores. I say local like it's not an hour-and-a-half drive from me, but I live in the middle of nowhere, so that's about as good as it gets. It's just like a sewing measuring tape, but it works in the same way as like those industrial ones that tradies use. So like you can get it out and keep it at a certain length, and then you just press the button and it winds back up. I don't know why, that really fascinates me. I got two thimbles. I've got this cute little owl one over here, which I think I also inherited from someone. Like they just gave me like their aunt or their grandma's old collection of sewing stuff. But this one here is one of the most useful things ever because it's like more of a rubbery texture, which is incredibly useful because it grips, right? And it sits on your finger much better because it's got a bit of give to it. Honestly, if you have like never really used thimbles because they're kind of clunky and stupid, get yourself some sort of like leather or silicone or rubbery one. They are so useful. Okay, under layer one, I have got lots more thread in case that giant box that I got from that old boutique was not enough. So yeah, it's lots of threads, and then it's like press studs and fasteners and all that sort of thing that I barely use. Also something I have way too much of, these are just full of buttons and beads and little tiny things like that. Again, a lot of places will do like clearances. You find a lot of like giant collections in op shops, and I can never say no to them. Scissors and cutters live in here too. I have to keep these separate from my crafting scissors and cutters because otherwise I'll just reach for these accidentally and use my sewing scissors on foam, which is basically like the 8th deadly sin. These two here are more tools, and these are definitely not organized at all. Like I just tend to end up shoving things into here. This heat gun is one of my most precious possessions. I think I actually accidentally stole it from my dad when I was a teenager. It has not stopped working. I think it's just one of those things that like existed before planned obsolescence was really a thing. Oh, my hobby knife blades are in here. I was looking for these. I have all manner of different hot glue sticks and hot glue guns in here. Oh, bugger. These clippers, which are pretty much just for faux fur, and also my respirator, which I use all the time. I used to have my Dremel and wood burning tools in this, and then I started putting them in the garage instead, with the intention of encouraging me to try and make sure that I'm using those outside with ventilation because safety, but also I hate that I did that because now they're outside in the garage and it's either really cold, it's rainy, or it's really hot. But I will admit it was probably the right choice for my stupid health. So this one is basically UV resin, mica powder, fabric dyes. A lot of the UV resin and these mica powders I use fairly often to make little tiny glass bottle charms. Put a pin in that, I'll tell you more when I get to a different box. Actually, the box in question is right here, so I'll just tell you about it. So I have a bunch of these little tiny glass bottles in which I put a bit of UV resin with like some mica powders or some glitters or some dyes and just mix it up with like a little toothpick or something, let it set, and it becomes these beautiful little charms. So if I'm going to a convention and dressing as Juniper, I'll make up like a ton of these little tiny potion charms to have in like a pouch with me so I can give them out as little charms or keepsakes, especially for kids. Glitter and sequins, lots of plastic rhinestones, metal chains and fittings and fixings. Also, a lot of these plastic bags for storage are actually old wig bags that I've just kind of repurposed for storage. I have just discovered the hard way there's a hole in the bottom of the glitter bag. This is especially annoying because I just vacuumed, but I guess we're doing it again. This one here is wax sealing supplies. So I've got stamps, I've got wax. I use this stuff mostly for Patreon. Several of the tiers actually get like handwritten letters from me, which I always wax seal up before I send them off. I know that seems like a lot of work. It is, but I like being able to give people something tangible, something like handmade. I just kind of think it's a nice way to show connection and gratitude to the people who support me. So shout out to my patrons, and also go join my Patreon. This one is trims and zips and rope and all that sort of thing. And this is a very fun box just because I really like pretty things, and you get all these cool like little ribbons and trims. Again, often I'm looking for like fancy deals and stuff like that from various $2 shops or like closing down sales, that sort of thing. Now I try not to buy too much stuff that I don't have like a plan or a use for, but I'm a bit of a sucker for trims because sometimes I see something like this and I have no plans for it, but it's so beautiful I have to have it, and then like I'll just eventually find a use for it. Eventually. As you can see from the bags, this was at some point kind of organized into different kinds of trim, but since then I've kind of given up on it and it just goes into here, which does mean that like a lot of this is just a tangled mess. But I was also looking for this for a different project. So again, I keep finding stuff that I need. This is great. In this very back corner up against the wall, we've got wigs in this one. The rest of the line up from there are all feathers. And the reason I have so many is because I used to make commissioned headpieces, like the harpy ones that I use for Juniper, as kind of like a large portion of my income. It's a lot of work for not very much profit, so I don't do it very regularly anymore, but I am slowly going through my feather collection just by doing ready-made headpieces once in a blue moon. Back up to standing, this is basically all tape, a large portion of which is just this fragile tape. I've mentioned this in previous videos, but long story short, several years ago, I accidentally ordered way too much of this stuff, and I've been trying to use it up ever since. This one is more sewing stuff, mostly Velcro, bias binding, horsehair braids, stuff like that. Up here, we're coming into like painty stuff. So this one is literally just a giant box of paint, and it's really heavy. This one here is various paintbrushes and tools like your clay sculpting tools and cutting mats. This one doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's just kind of like miscellaneous sheets of fabric. This one I bought as like a green screen curtain. I haven't tried it yet. So if you see me trying weird green screen stuff in future videos, that's what's up. You might have noticed there's a little tiny bit of a gap between these two shelves, and that is because I have basically got like a curtain rod set up so that I can pull this across my whole room and create a background. So this makes it super easy for me to like create like a nice backdrop to film against, because not everything is gonna look good against like a bunch of cool shelves. And if I want different color effects, I've just got these really cheap little bar lights. These were from Kmart for like $15. It means what's essentially just a plain gray curtain I can make look like different colors and effects pretty easily. So this whole thing is like an $8 curtain rod from IKEA, which I have literally just put into like a right angle PVC elbow, wrapped that in duct tape, attached it to like a big wooden dowel, which is in turn attached into like this little metal piece that I got. I don't even remember where I got this, which I've screwed down into this flat offcut of wood so that I have like a nice stable base. Now up here is a little bit of a mess, but I think I'm going to worry about that later. As grateful as I am to have the space I do, I don't have room to have have a lot of my like creations out on mannequins and on display. But since I tend to make a lot of headpieces, a lot of those do go up here, so I still am able to look at them. And I really do like just glancing up here because it reminds me of some of the really cool things that I've made. So a lot of these tend to be like my favorite things that I've made, like my Fallen Angel headpiece. My Tanta Sailor helmet I still think is some of the best warbler work I've ever done, like on these little hanging S shapes. This monstrosity over here I made for like Halloween last year, I think. And the goal was to have all of these moving and blinking eyes, but I was trying to control all of them with puppetry, which is just starting to get a bit ridiculous. All of these eyes like do move in their sockets and all of the lids do blink, but I think I just couldn't get it all working at once. So I'm actually going to take a crafting break here because something I've been meaning to do for a while is to paint a lot more of these to match these brown ones, because I have been finding myself trying to angle the camera away from these ones and I want to be able to like have more options for angles. Actually, before I do the painting, I'm just going to quickly vacuum up this glitter before I end up treading it through the rest of the house.
So acrylic paint is probably not the right choice for these shelves, but so far it's lasted on the previous ones, so we're just gonna keep going. For the boxes, I watered it down a little bit and I've added some fabric medium to help it soak in. And as you can see, I've got a plastic tablecloth down because I don't want to get paint stains on my lovely new bamboo desktop. I know I'm far too messy and clumsy as a person to risk that.
So while my boxes are drying, this like back corner here between these two shelves has kind of always been a bit of an awkward space, but I think I've done a pretty good job of like filling it out. So I've got all these hanging baskets with the fake plants and I've got this cool little lantern thing here. These are literally just hanging off like a wooden dowel that I've got like suspended between the two shelves. I'm not going to talk about my little moth buddy today. That is all coming up in literally the next video. So I guess subscribe for more. This back panel here is actually just a really long piece of cardboard, which is a deconstructed box, which I think is the one that one of my computer monitors came in. Anyway, I've covered it with like this sort of wood grain contact, but the cardboard is kind of bowing in places because it was never like one continuous piece. This is nitpicking, but it really bugs me as well that I couldn't get it to go all the way to the roof. Coincidentally, I did recently acquire a very large and long flat piece of cardboard that I could use to replace this.
So making great use out of the FlexiSpot desktop box. Try saying that one 5 times fast. FlexiSpot desktop box. I'm basically making a big board of removable wallpaper. The letters and painting in the back were both gifts from followers of mine, so I'm extra careful removing these. Old board out, new one in, and the old board I was able to cut up into smaller panels to help fill up the space closer to the ceiling. While I was fiddling around, I took the time to neaten up some of the headpieces up here on the top of the shelf. Once the boxes were dry, I decided I wasn't quite done with it, so I went back in with some gold poster paint just to create like a little bit more texture. And while my brain was firmly stuck in crafting mode, I decided to replace my ugly masking tape labels. So these are little brown strips of paper I cut up that I'm putting some of that gold onto the edge of as well. These were stuck on with some strong fabric glue, so hopefully they'll last.
Okay, it's the next day and this space is looking pretty nice now. So like this backdrop is definitely looking a little bit neater. It probably looks mostly the same for you guys, but like I can see the difference. I'm really happy with how like these extra boxes came out. Like this is almost in frame to like the very front of the room. So that's really lovely. You can see I've put like a couple little plant bits on some of these shelves. I kind of just wanted to tie into that one a little bit. Plus it kind of gives me the feeling of like an apothecary lab or something where all of the herbs are spilling out of the different drawers. I also chucked this little basket stand thing in here. This is like from an op shop that was just kind of floating around the house before, so now it's got a home. Back here in this corner as well, I've got my bar lights and you can see they're so low profile they really don't get in the way. So even though they don't match the aesthetic, you can barely see them back here in the corner. This is the part I've been looking forward to. This shelf, I basically just call it Juniper shelf because it's got the same vibe where it's kind of going for magic apothecary, potions lab, library, Dumbledore's office, that sort of thing. This serves the purpose of being the enrichment in my enclosure part of the room and the background that you see in most of my videos. I'm not usually one for collecting things, but this shelf is like the one exception I have in the whole house. And you might notice a couple of common themes. Owl mug, owl mug, owl mug, owl mug, owl mug. My favorite owl mug, mostly just because it's gigantic so it can hold a lot of coffee. Owl teapot, Owl, 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 more owls, owl, owl, owl. This little portrait back here is also a gift from one of my followers. This little dragon guy down here, I actually hand sculpted out of foam clay and wire. That was for a sponsorship with Life Makeover a couple of months ago. A previous birthday present of mine, Elantris and Warbreaker, both signed copies, no big deal. Most of this whole shelf is made up of gifts I've received, lucky finds from secondhand stores, and stuff I've made myself that I think fit the vibe. This is a Cantilee, and I got this during like 2020 lockdown. I thought maybe I'd learn to play while we're all stuck inside. I never learned to play. This ocarina was a birthday present from my brother. I also never learned to play. And somewhere floating around here that I can't find right now, I have a tin whistle. Exactly the same story. These D20 candles here were also a gift from a follower. I've just barely burnt them because I don't want to burn them down. They're too pretty. This little Welsh dragon sculpture is actually incredibly precious to me. It's sort of a family hand-me-down or antique. I've never really felt like a strong cultural identity. So this is one of those rare pieces that serves as a connection to my past and my heritage. And this like top section here above the shelf, that's just cardboard, again, that I've just covered in that same contact. And it means all of the area like behind it, I could just use as storage for all my mannequin heads and also random cosplay props that I should be taking better care of. Down here is kind of more of the same. It becomes a bit more of a dumping ground because like it's less visible. Right now, that box is where I keep my Tanta Sila cosplay. So in general, for like 2/3 of this whole room, I've kind of decorated it aiming for like that warm and cozy fantasy potions lab or apothecary. I wanted to make the space look like a fantastic background for most of my videos and be a warm and inviting space for myself because I'm working in here all the time. I got one last thing I want to show you guys before we move on. So it's still not perfect lighting, but I kind of wanted to show you what the space looks like with a bunch of the lights on it.
Now I've only just started putting lighting into here, so I'm sure I'll tweak it, but I love how the light reflects through the transparent potion bottles and bounces off the metallic brass and gold.
And I'm sure I'm not going to turn these on every time I film, but it's just a nice little extra touch to have. Moving on, this is my door. Very exciting stuff, I know. But this giant whiteboard I use to just kind of like organize my everything. So I use it as like a calendar for the month ahead. I have like to-do lists. I have a list of upcoming things I need to budget for and like a breakdown of those budgets. And I just realized that future Charlotte is probably going to have to blur all of this because a lot of this stuff is secrets. But side note, if you want to see updates and work in progress on what's coming up, you should go and join my Patreon. On the back of the door, I have some very poorly hung up contact because again, we can't actually stick it to the door. I've got my aprons and my lovely lady Fern. And this is just a giant list, basically breaking down all the different steps for this cosplay. This side of the room, I like to call, you can have a little bit of e-girl as a treat. A complete departure from like the warm browns and gold of the rest of the room. This is kind of my compromise to myself because I want to have every aesthetic, but you can't have every aesthetic. So it's got elements of e-girl, but it's also kind of an ode to like my 2000s nostalgia. Being the PC setup, it's where I do my editing. And by editing, I mean vaguely mash together the footage with some voiceover before I give it to my actual editor, Allison, who works her magic to make the final product. I also play games. Pretty much anything that doesn't play on my Switch or Xbox in my lounge room, I'll play on the PC. And just to destroy my own e-girl aesthetic, I have this baby up here. So this is the head of my Albeast costume, which is honestly, to this day, one of the coolest things I've ever made. I'd never made anything close to a fursuit when I made this, so all things considered, I think I did a really good job. All right, let me see how I go with this. Everyone keeps asking if I'm a furry. I have no idea why. Oh, it's hot in there. It's very hot in there. I feel like a lot of people would find this absolutely terrifying, staring down into the room. But I think the fact that I made it myself means I'm kind of desensitized to it. So this box here is basically like makeup palettes, body paints, a hairbrush, just various bits and pieces. Portable chargers, you get the gist. Down here we've got like hairspray, hair gel, makeup remover wipes, contact lens fluid, all very exciting. In here is basically like tripods and tripod-like things. This has been one of the most useful things I've bought. It's literally like a mini portable tripod. This one's for phones, so it's even smaller than the normal ones, but it just opens out like that. You do this, you pull that all the way out, and you stick your phone in there and you can turn it around, you can tilt it, all sorts of things. So I can just like slap my phone on there and record some behind the scenes things. I have a couple of these. You can screw like a ring light or even a camera onto one of these, and they're basically tripods. Like you can set it down on a desk, but these are also bendable, so you could like grip it over like an existing bar or the edge of a table. So they're quite handy for trying to juggle like multiple lighting and camera setup. This little contraption, also one of the most useful things I have. So your phone goes in here, this goes around your neck, and essentially essentially you can be like filming something with both of your hands and it's gonna like follow you around. I've used this a fair bit in the garage because I don't want to take out my tripod and stuff. It's mostly just because I'm too lazy. Down here I've got my little Lambert plushie. This is from Cult of the Lamb, great video game. And he's just up leaning against the microphone that I do voiceover with. In here I've got like receipts I haven't sorted yet, envelope stickers, just kind of miscellaneous stuff that goes in drawers. Bunch of empty plastic tubs. You have no idea how useful it is just to have a bunch of empty tubs around. I think the main thing I tend to use it for is like I fill it up with stuff that I need to take to the garage if I'm doing like some spray painting out there, that sort of thing. So this is basically like a miniature cube shelf. Because this is right below the window, there's not that much I can do with this space, but this works quite well because I've got like a couple of drawers down here and I can just put stuff on top. Like right now, it's where this giant mirror lives. This is actually great though, because if you're doing like really complicated makeup, this can like sit on your desk, and when it's plugged in, all these things light up around the side. So you get some pretty decent lighting when you don't have the natural light coming in. But down here, this is like basically all the spare beads and trim from my vampire ball gown, and it's here instead of like away in various places because I still plan to eventually do some extra work on it. So it's just gonna kind of sit there until I'm ready. So right next to my little cube shelf is this monstrosity, and this is fantastic because it's basically the rest of my makeup. I've got things like my false eyelashes, contact lenses, stick-on fake nails. Down here we've got like just tons of different glitters and eyeshadows and powders and various lipsticks and eyeliners. I'm sure at least half of this is technically past its use-by date. This is me confessing my cosplay sins because I am too cheap to throw out makeup every single time it expires. If it's like a powder or something, I don't care. I'm keeping that until I've scraped every last molecule off that palette. I nestled in right next to the window here in this space is like a sort of photo sticker wall. Much like all of that wood grain contact, this is all stuck to a giant sheet of paper, so I'm not going to be losing my bond trying to rip all this off. Every time I go to a convention, I try and buy a print or a sticker or a postcard from every cosplayer guest there. I'm a firm believer in aggressively supporting your peers. And I found the best way for me to not overspend at cons is go through Artist Alley and allow myself to get like a couple of sets of stickers each time, which is why I've kind of got them interspersed with some stickers. There's also a couple of stickers of Juniper and photos of myself in amongst these. There's also a lot of bird stickers. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone at this point. Very last part of my room tour is actually not in my room at all. This window won't stay open without me propping it up, so I'm just going to use my head. So this window does have a fly screen. It's like right there, as you can see. I just haven't been bothered to put it back on because I kind of like having an open space out here because it meant I could put this table out here. This is actually incredibly convenient because like if I'm painting something, I need to leave it to dry. I can just whack it out here on the table, close the window, don't have to think about it. Also, if I'm gluing something with contact cement, I can set it out here on the table to let the fumes dissipate. And I know I could just like go outside for those things, but this actually makes it so much easier. I don't have to go very far. I don't have to like unlock any doors or put on shoes. I can just slap it there, close the window, done. So now you've seen everything in the actual craft room, but I do have some extra stuff like strewn about in various nooks and crannies, and this is one of those. I'm not going to show you the rest of the room because it's like a shared space, but all of these tubs are basically my fabric stash. And I know it might seem excessive. You are correct. I don't have a fabric hoarding problem. You have a fabric hoarding problem. Okay, but just to walk it back a little bit, some of these are old clothes. Some of them are also full of cosplays rather than just fabric. This whole massive tulle down here is literally just my hoop skirt. And I do want to point out that this is like 10 to 15 years worth of collecting of fabric. I also want to point out, like a lot of my craft supplies, people find out that I use a lot of fabric and they will just donate their stashes to me. And I cannot say no. I'm really bad at saying no. I think I mentioned like a local boutique that hand makes their clothes closed down a little while ago. They had literally giant rolls of silk in their store that they were selling for like $10 for the bolt. And some of those were like at least 5 to 7 meters worth of silk for $10 a bolt. And in case you don't believe me, here are my receipts. There's also a place that used to be close to where I lived called Resource Rescue, which is basically like dead stock stuff that was going to be like literally thrown into landfill that's, I guess, literally rescued. And it's mostly for like theater groups or like schools to come and get craft supplies, just lots of random little bits of junk. But they have giant rolls of fabric fairly often. And the fabric is usually rubbish, but it works really well for like mock-ups or something. I say that like I make mock-ups. I also have like a friend of a friend's mum who worked for like an upholstery factory, and they were downsizing, so they were getting rid of just ungodly amounts of upholstery fabric, upholstery foam, foam. So I also have like a gajillion rolls of stuff like this, some of which could pass for wool. So I don't actually spend that much to get like a massive fabric hoard like this. I just never throw anything out, and I'm a fierce opportunist. And yes, I'm trying to convince myself as much as I am convince you guys. So transparency here, I haven't like shown you everything. There's things I've skipped over or glossed over, and I'm not going to show you guys my garage because it's a massive mess right now, and I don't feel like cleaning it up. But in case you're wondering where some of my gigantic costume parts are, like all the wings, they're all out there. But I hope you enjoyed seeing a little bit into my world and how I've built up this space to really make it mine. A huge thank you to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this one. I'm genuinely so grateful to finally have a good desk and chair for this space. As always, a huge thank you to my ultimate supporters on Patreon: Artemis, Dakota, Fluky, Residual Images, Rakishan, Robert Mischief, Tamara, Tim, and Yuri. And let's not forget these other incredible Patreon supporters who are appearing on screen now. Come and join us over on Patreon. I post work in progress, behind the scenes, and entirely exclusive mini videos and projects that you won't find anywhere else. And joining Patreon is the best way that you can support me so I can keep making ridiculous projects. But even just being here on YouTube, watching my videos, liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing, all those little things that keep the YouTube robots happy, you are helping and supporting me. So thank you very much for watching, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next video. Bye!